Hi, welcome to this Open Security Summit session in September 2024. And I'm going to be presenting about how my advice is to use GenAI to understand and transform content, not to create it. So I have some really cool demos, some really cool examples of hallucinations, non-hallucinations, and how to really, use GenAI in the next level on some of these things. So I've seen this presentation, which I delivered recently. One of the things I talk about kind of here is that, yes, Gen AI is going to be massive. It is the next major technology revolution. And for me, it is not because it can create content, which it can, and there's times for it, which is great, but because it can understand content. And I think that's very important. And most hallucinations happen when it doesn't have content, when basically you expect the LLM to go and get content in itself, right? And let's start there, right? Let's start kind of, and I'm using, by the way, so I'm using for this the Cyber Boardroom, which is one of my projects. This is the beta version and the community, so everything's online, it's open source, right? You can get it from PyPy and from Docker Hub, and then you can try it, right, and use it the community prod if you just want the web version online, right? So that's kind of a variation of what I'm using here, right? I'm just using my dev one because I already pushed a couple of little changes which haven't made it to prod, but fundamentally it's this. So here's the thing, right? So, and I'm assuming you can see that I got multiple providers, multiple platforms, and multiple models here that you can play with. And some models have more knowledge than others, and I'm going to basically be exploring first some of that so I can show you kind of how it works and how to think about some of these things, right? So the first kind of interesting question is that the best, is how do the models have knowledge, right? So the best understanding that I've seen that explains how the LLMs work. And I think it's important to distinguish between Gen AI and machine learning and deep learning. I think there's very different, similar technology, but very different kind of ways of thinking. And for me, the generative AI has an interesting property, which is it fundamentally has this middle step, right? It has this kind of intermediate representation where you go from input, you have an intermediate representation, and then you have an output, right? And I think that's very different, right, from a lot of other systems, right? And I think it's very powerful, the flows, right? That you kind of want to think of this as literally an air gap between the input and the output. And it's kind of like what it does is GenAI creates a graph representation fundamentally in multiple layers, multiple dimensions of what you're trying to say, and then translates it. So what it means that if I go in here to a LLM, right, and then say, hi, let's say, me, right? So you basically, actually picked up this, right? So the thing about this is, if you think about, if you kind of, you kind of want to figure out how does the LLM knows this. So the LLM knows this because when it was fed the data and was fed and it was adjusting its models, it started to create a relationship between, different elements, in this case, my persona with OWASP and stuff like that. And it starts to make these associations with other things it does. So in this case, for example, that is actually correct, right? But that is reasonably wrong, right? Yes, I helped a little bit, but I was not involved in development. I don't think I ever submitted, right, a patch to WebGoat. And for the security conferences, I actually never presented a black hat. I presented a DEF CON, right? But I never presented a black hat. So you could see that in a way, it's 99% correct, but now, or 90% correct. But there's this weird, right, errors that he has, right? And especially one of the things that's really cool, if you go here, so there's one of these models where you can basically ask the same question to three LLMs, right? So if you go, this is not a bad one, so I can go and say again, if you ask again to three different LLMs, so in this case it's chatbot, Google, Meta, and then Google Gemini, you start to see, right? This is even more crazy, right? Like, I've never done that. I never done that. I never done this, right? I'm pretty sure this thing doesn't exist, right? So, pretty crazy hallucinations, right? On this. right? And basically, so look, this one actually said, I developed, again, there's a web go, CF Argard, definitely not, right? I definitely never, I never wrote these two books, right? And it's important, right, to see that, how does this occur? So this occurs because the LLM has to bring their own knowledge, right? And it brings their own knowledge from the relationships that it has. So it's kind of like its memory. So this is where it goes wrong. So my point is that if you're looking for the LLMs to give you creative stuff, to give you stories, to give you, in a way, almost like creative or thoughts or something to start with, it's really good because it's, the hallucinations become, in a way, a feature. If you want facts, that doesn't work, right? So my point is that you want to give the LLMs the knowledge that it should be operating, and then you ask on that knowledge, right? And that's kind of what RAG does a lot. So let me give you some cool examples. So here's an interesting thing, right? So if I go to OWASP and I find OWASP projects, right? So if you look at OWASP projects, OWASP has this list of lab projects, right? It has these incubator projects, and then it has these flagship projects. Actually, what I want is the main ones, right? Actually, I don't want this. I want this guys here. Cool. See? So OWASP has these flagship projects. It has these production projects, right? So you can see here, right? So, but if I go to one of the LLMs, right, and let's go to, for example, let's go for a good one, right? Let's say I want to go for, let's say GPT-4o, right? So actually, it's quite a good provider, right? And I say, what are the OWASP ship projects, right? So again, remember that because this guy doesn't go to the internet, right? He's now gonna try to go by this sort of memory, right, of what the projects were. But is it correct? Is it 100% correct, right? Is it actually connected, right, to the, let's say SKF, right? I think I picked up this guy here, right? Let's say, for example, I think let's see what status of this project, right? So actually, that's interesting. See, look, so this project is not at the moment. I thought it was actually interesting, right? Is not one of the current OWASP top 10 projects, right? So OWASP main projects, right? It might actually be on here. Let's just take a quick look here. Oh, interesting, right? You moved on. I thought it was actually here, SKF. No? All right. But I'll give you a better example than that. But the logic here is that where does this knowledge came from, right? And if I now go into a different model, maybe I go to Llama 31B, right? And I ask the same question, right? You get kind of different answers, right? Or get variations of the answer, right? And you got these kind of things here, right? And let me see, where is the SAP guy here, right? Is Enterprise Security Guides one of the flagship, right? So okay, oh, it's not there too. Cool, interesting. Okay, so but the problem here, right, is that you're relying on a history of the model, right? So what's much better is to turn this around, and I have a cool demo here where I create this use case about OWASP projects. Now, what's interesting about this is if I go into this particular bot, right, that needs to be customized, right, and I ask what are the OWASP flagship projects, right? What you now have is a much clearer list. In fact, you get this nice list of 15 projects, right, of what they're, right? And if I again say, what are the OWASP production project, right? I get, again, a list of nice 8 projects, right? Which very clear will map to these ones here, right? API, bug bountying, OWASP secure headers, right? So, and I can even ask some cool questions, right? Like, I'm a DevOps engineer, what are the best projects that can help me? And also remember that you can also play around with this, right? You can get this question from, again, GPT-4o, etc. right? And it gives you, a nice little thing, right? So you can go DevSecOps engineer, you benefit from this project, that project, that project, that project. By the way, OWASP should have this on the main website, right? So this is really cool, right? What kind of tools can I use to reduce my supply chain, right? So that's a nice conversation, and that comes all from these projects. Now, this one is not making things up. Why? The reason it's not is because here is the system prompt. So let me walk you through it. So the text you see below here is the system prompt fed to this chatbot here. So you can see you are OWASP GPT. In fact, I can say, who are you? You should probably say, there you go, OWASP GPT, a helpful large language model on the OWASP projects is to assist in understanding and selecting OWASP projects based on your needs. Feel free to ask me any questions related to projects. And that's why, because there's the prompt here. You are an OWASP GPT, a helpful large model, only trained on the OWASP projects included below, right? Actually, if I say this is the OWASP O2 platform and OWASP project, right? There you go. Actually, that's cool. Right? It's not listed against the project provided, right? So the scope is you should be strictly limited to the provider. So you can start to see that we're limiting the scope, but more importantly, right? This is the content that I provide, which is direct copy and paste from the website. So you can see that that particular version of the LLM is not going to hallucinate because it was given, right, the actual content that I'm asking for. So because I have this, you can see that all these projects here are exactly the projects that you're going to get from, if you ask it, what are the production projects? You can see his API, and you should basically get the exact list here. But logging, Carranza, Cigar, mod security, and that's exactly the stuff you get here, right? So at this stage, I'm not getting hallucinations. I'm not getting stuff made up. So I'm getting the exact content. So fundamentally, this is what you want to do. You want to feed it content, right? And that's when you don't get hallucinations. So you then start to use the LLMs to understand content. So let me show you, a variation of this. So I created one of the UIs I'm playing with here is this UI where you can ask the same question to 3 different LLMs, and then you have the 4th LLM to review it. So fundamentally is this workflow here, right? So you kind of have, this kind of workflow where you basically, you say, hey, ask one question to this LLM, one question to LLM, the other question to the other LLM, right? And then you create a prompt with, a variation of this, right? Plus 3 answers. In fact, what I'm doing is more kind of this, right? So I'm grabbing this LLM to say, so I'm doing a variation of this where I'm saying, is that a good answer? And can you create, an analysis of it? So what I have here is fundamentally, I have this thing where I can ask a question. What are the OWASP flagship projects? I can ask for anything. And then I'm going to get an answer from Meta, from Gemma on Google, from Mistral, right? And then I'm going to say to the 4th LLM, right, which I think is going to be, again, Llama, another version. I say, act like a content reviewer with focus on details, review the 3 results for 3 different LLMs, review them for accuracy, completeness, and correctness, and spot instances. And then I'm saying, for reference, here's the full list of OWASP projects. See? So I give it the same text as I had before. So what now you have is, if I now go here and submit this, right, to these 3 models, you get to see that, and that's using Grok, which is really cool, super fast. Okay, you could saw it was quite fast, right? So here you got one answer with these projects, this answer, and then that answer, right? So what you now do is you take all of these, right? And then you're going to append this prompt, and I'm going to go aggregate and submit. So now what you see in this box here is the whole prompt that went to the 4th LLM. So basically it's the text I had above, right? Act like a content reviewer. That's the text. And then for reference, here's a list of all projects, right? So in a way, that's the system prompt, if you think about it. In this case, it's not really, but it's equivalent to that. And then I say, here's the answer for chatbot 1. here's the answer from chatbot 2, here's the answer from chatbot 3, and then what I have, right, is you go, after reviewing the answer from the chatbots, identify several issues. So for example, chatbot 1, WebGuard was not involved, right? ISAPI was not involved, right? Yeah, so you can see that in this case, he says it's not going as a flagship in the provider project list, right? And then the mentioned mod security was also part of that, right? And also provides 6, where the actual has 14, right? So you go on this one, talks about the different, mistakes with it, right? And again, different mistakes projects, right? So you could see that in a way, all chatbots providing complete, most provide accurate descriptions, which are very inaccurate, and then the most recent changes on the projects, right? So here's a good example of how I'm now able to detect, right, the differences between the different projects, and and if whether they hallucinate, so the different projects, the different prompts, and whether they're hallucinating or not, right? So that's the kind of stuff that you want to be doing. And my point is that what the LLMs are very good at is at reviewing this, is at reviewing content, is analyzing content, breaking content, and basically not at that level, they don't hallucinate a lot. So I want to give you, so another little quick case that I want to talk about is just what, and I mentioned this before, but let me just cover it again, is the concept of history, right? So one of the coolest things that you got in the Cyber Boardroom UI, because I spent quite a bit of time creating this chatbot environment, right, is that you can actually edit messages, right? So if I go, hi, my name is Dinis, what is n plus, plus 32, right? What's interesting is you could see, look, what's my name? It says 10 plus 32 is 42. And I could say, hey, what do you know about the history, right? So this is actually a prompt that you can say. Some people even use this to jailbreak or to extract some stuff. You can say, look, based on the conversation, because this is what was fed to the LLM as the history. So what the LLM gets as the history is only this. Without this, he has no context. He hasn't learned anything. He doesn't know the difference. So you can see that he kind of knows this. But what happens, right, if I now say, I'm Steve, right? And I go, actually, the answer is 100. I'm going to edit this and say the answer is 111, right? And then here I also, edit this and go, actually even go wrong. You say my name was John, and I answered the answer to is 42. I go to 122, right? So you can see that I've actually, changed that, change this, right? Change the answer, right? And then modify this. And then let's now pick another model. Let's say I'm going to go for Claude 3. And now I can say, can you double check, right? Double check your answers, right? And the power of this is that when I send the prompt to Claude 3.5, it doesn't know that it wasn't Claude 3 who did this. All it knows that there's a history that exists with this information. So you can see now it goes, oh, you're right. You asked me double check, there's errors. So he picks up errors, right? So my name is Steve, not John, because you can see now that is correct from here. And also he picked up the fact that is 42, not the answer 111, right? So although it's interesting in this case that it didn't pick up this data here, which could have been another variation of it. My point is that the LLMs, when you send it in data, they only know the data that you give into it, which is kind of why that's what you want the universe of the data that they process to be that, right? So that's kind of when I give my recommendations here, and I kind of say that my recommendations is read-only models and all that stuff. That's kind of what I mean, right? What I mean here is have read-only models, which is models that you get from one of the providers. Many of them out there, they start to learn. Some of them you can run offline these days, which is really cool. The prompt is what you give it to. That's where the action is. Not a lot of times the model just gives you reasoning, and you bring your own content. That's kind of the example I was saying. So you basically give it the content. So you create a universe that the LLM, in a way, most of the time is operating on. And then I think the RAG job, or the name of the game is, what is the context that you need to provide, which these days can be quite big, for the LLM to actually be able to do a good job with that answer. So that's the name of the game. So now let's look at a very interesting use case here, which is kind of one of the things that I want to cover, because I think it really shows the power of the LLMs in understanding context. So kind of what I want to show here is that, the LLMs don't necessarily need to even be given stuff in English or different languages, right? You can give it all sorts of different things that it actually understands quite well, right? So let me give you that example. So what I want to do here is I'm going to pick this use case, which is, and by the way, again, you can download this, you can run this from your LLMs, you can even run this offline if you wanted. So let's say I have an EF config, which kind of looks like this. It kind of like, it's kind of, on one line, multiple lines, but it's kind of the same thing, right? It's completely, this is from OS X, it's completely unreadable, right? Which I always find quite, frustrating, right? Because sometimes I just want the IP address, right? So what I'm doing here is I created a system prompt to say, hey, you netconfig GPT, and your job is to answers to the information that exists here. So what happening is that I have all this, which is a huge amount of data, right? Huge amount of text, huge amount of, just, data. And I'm going to say, what are the IPs, v4 of that, right? And so again, what happens here, right, is the prompt contains the original data, which is all that text, plus my question. And now it gives me entirely accurate answers. And at this stage, it's not hallucinating, right? Like, I can try different models, right? I can try different things, and is very reliable, right? So if you think about it, that value there is spot on, right? It's not making up shit, right? Again, like, play around with different models. Actually, Mistral just launched a bunch of new ones, right? Again, you can send this information to it, right? And it doesn't hallucinate, right? You can see it's picking up, that one there, right? And actually, this is where you can even play around and say, okay, what's the lowest level model? Okay, this GPT-5 Turbo, right? Will it still pick it up? And you can see it still does the same thing. So it doesn't hallucinate. So the power is like, I can now be using, sometimes for these much cheaper models, because I've already consolidated some information, and even the cheaper models understand this stuff quite effectively, right? So, let's say, other kind of interesting information. Let's actually go to a better model just in case, but I can go, right, so is any sensitive information on a configuration, right? Now, by the way, I've already obfuscated this, but, it's a good point, right? He says, look, there's this one here, right? There's the IP address and the IPv6, right? So the IPv6, so it's quite good. So now I can ask all sorts of interesting questions, right, about it, right? And I can see what's happening, what's not happening. The point is I'm now talking about the content in that particular IF config, which is also what I think is going to be the future of a lot of tools and a lot of our experience in our OS and automation, how it works, is that if you think about it, like in this case, the LLM is giving me a lot of value just by taking something that I run on my computer that gets me a whole blob of text. I can go, okay, what's relevant in there? And the more we gain confidence that it's not really hallucinated, the more we get to use it, because it becomes super valuable, right? So, and then of course, the other thing you could also do here is you can basically play around with the model. So I can go and say, let's say my first model gives me this, right? You go, okay, based on this information, you can then go into another model, right? And then you can say, can you double check? Can you double, check the answer, right? And this is where, as you're playing around with this, you start to go, if you then start to have multiple, for example, IP addresses, so multiple variations of the same answer, or multiple confirmations that the answer is the same of multiple models, you start to go, cool, I now have high assurance that this is actually indeed the correct answer. So in this case, you ask this question to 3 different models, they all agree on the outcome, it becomes really good. one of the areas I'm going to explore a bit more is the area of actually even producing JSON outputs. So the output becomes actually highly deterministic, right? In terms of what it is. So let's look at another example, right? Where the LLMs don't hallucinate a lot, or even if at all, on code. So for this example, I'm going to use this thing called Pyodite, which is freaking awesome, which is basically I'm running Python on the browser, right? This is absolutely ridiculous. It's using a WebAssembly. They compiled the most of the Python, in this case 3.12, so I can literally run that in the browser. So I'm just going to use some examples. Eventually, I'm going to integrate that with the Cyber Boardroom, but for now, I'm going to let's start something simple, right? Can you write? Actually, let's use Mistral CodeStraw, right? Okay. Can you write a simple Python script that outputs a message 5 times, right? So something simple, right? So I go, all right, cool, right? So there you go, right? Message, hello world. So you can come in here, you can paste it, and you can run it, and you go, hey, cool, look, hello world 5 times, right? So what happens if I now say, great, can you now, right, say the message 6 times, right? In fact, let me start again, right? I can use this one here, Llama 3. I could say, given this code, can you make it say 6 times, right? Now, the power of this is if you look at it, right? It didn't hallucinate at all, right? Same thing, right? Message hello world, use a for loop, right? And actually, the reason that is I support Markdown, right? So, but you could see, right? The code is not hallucinated. Now it's going to say it 6 times, right? And the end of the day, right, is if I go here and I say, right, again, same variation, and I say, okay, and I go, for this message, and I go, now, can you add an exclamation mark to the message, right? So now look, see, if you look at this, right, it's still the same thing, right? Oh, actually didn't do. There you go. So this guy actually didn't do that. Let's try this with a different provider. So, okay, cool. Right. So this guy, let's try Mistral code. They say if this actually, all right, that's one interpretation, right? So you could say, okay, so that worked, right? But you could see that it's not really hallucinating, right? It's basically making small little changes, right? But it's not making up stuff. And that's where, again, the code is, and I've done this with much bigger code bases, where I'm now very comfortable giving big code chunks to ChatGPT or even using the Copilot, but I still like to use ChatGPT a lot. Or, Claude is also quite good at this stuff, right? Where you say, modify me this, structure this, refactor this. I even have things where I say, here's my API, here's my structure, or here's an example of me using this API. Now rewrite it using this. Ridiculously powerful. So last really powerful example I want to cover, and this is actually, this next example is, so I'm going to show you, let me just get the page up. So this use case is, again, okay, so this use case, which is a simple assembly execution, is to show also the power of interpretation of the models that we have, right? So what I have here is I have a simple assembly, which I'll show exactly how it got created. And I'm basically I'll say, here's the program to execute, right? And if it goes just echo hello, the answer is hello. If I say this, so if you look at this, the answer should be x is 10, y is 20, adds x to y, or y to x, in this case, echo x, right? So this is going to add 20 to 10, is going to give me 30, right? So if I go here, paste this code, is actually goes x equals 30, simple as. Now, how does it does it? Now, what's really cool about this is I actually use the latest model, the Strawberry GPT, OI, whatever they call it, right, to create this spec. So what you have here is a spec, and this is another good example of you use one LLMs for one thing and the LLMs for other things. So I created here the spec of a simple assembly language that has this syntax. It has a set, which is basically, actually the formatting is not very good, but actually it's working quite well. I think the text is a bit better than this part here. So set, the syntax is plain text, set variable names, assigns a variable. Here's an example, assigns the variable 10 to letter A, adds, adds 5 to the value of I. So you can see, again, that's the convention. We basically say this could have been, adds one value to the other, but it's saying, look, in this case, it adds, if you go add AB, it's basically adding the value of B to A, right? You can subtract, you can multiply, you can divide, right? Or you can just echo the message, right? And then, here's some rules. Can store integer values only, integer base, and then we basically tell ChatGPT, or sorry, whatever LLM we're using. In this case, was actually Grok, Meta, Llama 1070B, to basically just say follow the instructions, right, and then output the message, right? So you're going to see if you say this, then you should say that, right? So this is really cool, right? Because what we could see here is that I can give basically just this command, right? You can see here, right? I can give a command that is basically just a set of instructions, and the LLMs, in fact, not even in fact, let's see if OpenAI 3.5 can handle it, right? And then there you go, right? It picked it up, right? So it's, of course, if you modify this to, and let's make this 42 because that's always a good number, right? You get X is 42 AAA. So you can see that you don't need to give, the LLM sometimes highly structured and highly massaged data. You can give it a TCP dump. You can give it like really complex data. I once, I did the experiment where I gave it a massive GitHub just change control, right? And it correctly picked up what was changed, right? So and a key point of my presentation is that this is what the LLMs are really good at. They're really good at understanding, creating an object representation of what this means, in this case, based on the rules that I set. So again, I'm not using it out of the box to say, like, what would you do with this, right? And how would that work? I'm basically leveraging the rules. But now I want to take this to another level to make it even more, a little bit more complex, is what about if we actually create a binary of this? So what you have here is really cool, is what happens if we converted this into what usually happens, which is binary code, which is that, right? Or let's say, a simple example, this one here, right? So let's say that I'm now going to go and I'm going to give it this sequence of letters and numbers, right? Is it going to be able to interpret it, right? And again, I'm using Llama 7B, so you can see he's able to construct that, and he gave me the right answer, which is hello world, right? Which is freaking cool, right? In fact, I think we might even be able to say, maybe in brackets here, let's just see, just give the answer, right? And actually, that's the output already. There you go. See? So it's basically, so the answer, which is basically this binary code here, is this: x equals 30, y equals 20, simple as makes fun, right? How cool is that, right? And actually, if we go here, let me just try this, right? So if you go like that, this should now, all right, oh, cool. Okay, sometimes you do hit the rate limits on, because I'm actually using the free one. The free ones, let me just try again. Sometimes that goes. It gives me, yeah, oh, that's a little mistake. Let me try a better one, right? Oh, did I copy and paste that? I did. So let me go into a better model, right? But the really cool thing of this, actually, it might actually work from here. It's just because you had the one above. All right, so it didn't like Grok. Let's try Open Router, right? Cloud 3, right? And there you go, right? Oh, there you go, 41, 41. Oh, I'm a donut. It's actually the one I'm wanting is this. And ooh, that's not what I was looking for. So, it didn't work 100%, right? But it it should, again, it shows that the point of this is that it's kind of understanding, right? Let me try again. This is actually annoying me now, right? Because I want the 44, 44, which should be the AAA, right? The message should be, and there you go. That's better, right? Oh, D. Yeah, I thought 41, 41. Yeah, it was 41. For the guys who kind of following this, like 41 is what we used to do when we used to do shell code in assembly, where we basically put in the, what's it called? We used to put lots of A's in the payloads, so that you then see, if you see a break, then you connect the dots, right? There you go. But this guy, I think it's probably 41. It depends on what interpret. I think I need to be more explicit, right, on 41, because he's not picking up but it's correctly, but it's incorrectly showing me that character. But cool. But so you can see that the power of this is that he's able to understand information. Of course, it's not perfect, and then it's about finding the best models, right? So one of the things that is really important now here is playing around with what is the best models that do this, and able to execute the codes, and then, and map it correctly, right? So, and that's why you want to experiment, right? So there you go. So my key premise in this is that I think that the key name of the game these days is you use GenAI to transform content, not to create it, right? And that's where the name of the game, and that's where the checks are, and that's where I feel a lot of the action, right, should be, because this means that as the models get better, you can see there was still some bugs in the models I was using, but as they get better, your solution gets better, right? Because you are using it to understand. So, and then if you start using other models to double check what you do, you start to get really powerful solutions. And the thing that changes is the prompts, right? So you figure out the workflows. So, and that's it. There's my session, play around with it, go to the community.prod AWS Cyberboard room, play with it, and then let me know what you think. Where's the, here we go.